Welcome to the second episode of the Digital Health Voice, a collaboration between MedTech World and Digital Health Malta. Today, we're going to interview Dr. Edmund Farrar, who is the co-founder of 𝐂𝐿𝐴. What's 𝐂𝐿𝐴? 𝐂𝐿𝐴 is a digital health company which is taking care and looking at the role of cognitive behavioral therapy for tinnitus. And with that in mind, I'd love to invite Dr. Edmund Farrar. It's a pleasure to have you here today, and I'm really curious, what's your digital health journey? What brought you here with us today?
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's really good to be on the show. So I suppose my digital health journey started a number of years ago now, actually. I suppose it all started when I had the idea for 𝐂𝐿𝐴. So I am a medical doctor by background. In my final year of medical school, I joined the Royal Air Force, the military. And during my time in the military, I developed a condition called tinnitus. So tinnitus is a condition commonly experienced as a ringing or rushing noise in the ears. And for me, thankfully, it was fairly mild, it was fairly quiet. It stopped me from sleeping from time to time, but it didn't have too much of an impact on my life. And I didn't think a huge amount of it. So fast forward a few years, I'd done my foundation training as a doctor, and my plan was to train to be a surgeon, actually a plastic surgeon.
Wow, all right.
So I started, just before I started core surgical training, I did some time just with the military. And during that time, I saw a large number of men and women with severe tinnitus. And this was interesting because I didn't realize the extent of how severe tinnitus can be. For me, it was mild. And then speaking to these men and women, I realized that, as you can imagine, the military, there's a fairly high risk of noise exposure. That can cause problems with hearing, problems with, and as a result of that, tinnitus. And in speaking to these people, I realized how big of a problem tinnitus was. And that sort of got me thinking, there's this big problem here. There's no cure. And to access any kind of help really for tinnitus is actually really difficult. So I thought, okay, well, there must be some sort of digital solution available for tinnitus. And it turned out that there wasn't really. And I thought, okay, well, I've got an opportunity here to use the skills I've learned as a doctor and in the military and create a digital solution, a digital health company that aims to help people with tinnitus and perhaps hearing loss as well. So I started looking into it. I got together with my co-founder George, who's a doctor in the Navy. He also has experienced tinnitus, somewhat worse than mine, but a number of years ago. He's thankfully habituated to that, and we got together and we sort of shared our experiences in the military, and we thought, okay, well, this is our opportunity. Neither of us had really any experience in digital health or business at all, for that matter. So we started reading, started doing some research, and made a huge load of mistakes along the way. But this was around 18 months ago. And I quit surgical training and I left the military in August last year, and I've been working on 𝐂𝐿𝐴 ever since.
What a big step, even you had the whole career ahead of you, but at the same time you forged ahead with a new career. Also, found it really cool, the sea and sky collaboration with your co-founder George. Is that correct? So that's why I sea and sky, lovely. So in reality, you really told me so much about 𝐂𝐿𝐴, and just having a quick look at your website, I could see that something is streamlined, is elegant, and I could really follow through, and it was quite easy. But my big question is how do you make the experience work for both patients and audiologists? Because this is not just about the patients, but it's also about the professionals who are taking care of these patients. How do you make it work for both the patients and the audiologists? What does it make it tick and work?
So we realized fairly early on that in order to make something that would work for both both patients or users and professionals, we need to focus on one of them first. And sort of we decided very early on to focus on building a product that users loved. And as soon as we realized that we built something that users were getting value from and getting benefit from, that's when we'd start focusing on the audiology side of things. So very early on, we thought, okay, we need, we can forget the audiologist. It was actually not really our intention we didn't have sort of strong intentions to work with audiologists at the beginning. We just wanted to build an amazing product. And we did that by, probably a lot of trial and error to begin with. We spoke to a very large number of people with tinnitus and tried to get a really good understanding of how it affected them. And I think that's where our learnings and understanding and our experience as doctors really helped, because at medical school and as doctors, you learn how to speak to people and you learn how to understand people's medical problems. So that put us in really good stead for creating something of benefit. We've also spent a lot of time getting feedback from users on how the product works, or how their experience with the product, and that's something that again we've used to put back in and improve and do a better job of giving them tinnitus treatment, I suppose. And then I suppose, how does that link in with how do we make something that works for audiologists? Well, it actually it sort of happened by accident, I suppose. What was happening is that people were using the product, people with tinnitus were using and getting value from the product, and then they were going to tell their audiologist or in some cases doctor. And in doing so, they sort of alerted the audiologist to our existence, and the audiologist would look into it and think, this is okay, this is actually something that's quite good. My patients are benefiting from this. Maybe this is something that other patients could benefit from, or this is something that I could use with other patients. So we sort of had that that sort of organic referrals of patients to audiologists and audiologists to other patients, and so we had audiologists starting to contact us, and in speaking to audiologists, we realised that tinnitus was actually a big problem for them as well. So effective treatment does exist for tinnitus in the form of something called cognitive behavioural therapy, CBT. But obviously it's very difficult to access, and there are very few audiologists or psychologists actually trained in cognitive behavioural therapy specific to tinnitus. And because there's not many that are trained in it, it's often very difficult for audiologists to manage tinnitus. So what audiologists were doing is either saying, I'm sorry, I can't do anything else for you here, or they were referring to someone else. And for independent audiologists, that's bad, because they are losing that patient, and it's a poor clinical experience. So we realized that we could solve not just a problem for users or individuals or patients, we could also solve a problem for audiologists. And with a bit of tweaking, we now have a product and solution that can be used for both individually and in clinical practice as well.
So you covered a bit the knowledge gap, is that correct? So there were some knowledge gaps, and you came in there to at least make that bridge between the two words. I have to admit, it's quite intriguing, and I also love the way you approach like that. Not you push technology, but rather getting a problem and finding a solution for it. And that's really and truly the core of entrepreneurship. And I even noticed that you are an NHS clinical entrepreneur. Is that correct?
Yeah, really cool. So I joined the clinical entrepreneur program actually, at the start, it's gone fast, at the start of this year. And we were already sort of 9 months into working on Otto, and it's been hugely helpful. Anyone interested in anything digital health or health tech, or has an idea, I would certainly recommend applying to the clinical entrepreneur program. But in response to your previous question about problem solution, I mean, we made a fair number of mistakes along the way, and it's so tempting to, when you have an idea, just go straight into building the product and thinking about features and things. And we did that, and we built something that no one used and no one would have used, and we had to sort of go back to the drawing board a few times. So it was a fairly steep learning curve, and we made a lot of mistakes along the way. but I know when it comes to doing it again, I can do it, do a much better job of it and do it much faster. But yeah, I'd really emphasize that it's been so helpful for us focusing on just sort of going back to basics and focusing on the problem, and then understanding how our solution can help that problem before even thinking about the product stuff.
Yeah, I'm truly amazed, really. I find, like even having this conversation with you, I kind of really realize the big role of digital health, and even I can also see an element of digital therapeutics, definitely. So I can see doctors prescribing this app if it's not happening already, I can see it happening in the very near future. And with that in mind, doctors and other health professionals face a number of auditory conditions as part of their practice. So what are you seeing in the future on the treatment of auditory conditions, even beyond tinnitus? Do you see a role for app being used in other conditions possibly? What's the feedback there that you've got so far from patients?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is actually helping doctors. So when I went through medical school, I don't think I learned anything about tinnitus, and I don't think it was I think it was barely in the curriculum, which to me is mad, because it's a condition that affects 1 in 8 people, and it has a significant impact on quality of life for hundreds of millions of people around the world. So what we see with people with tinnitus is time and time again, I would say 90% of the people with tinnitus that I've spoken to that have seen their GP or seen their doctor have said, sorry, there's nothing that can be done, which just isn't true. Like, there is so much that can be done for tinnitus, and you can learn to live with it. You can live a normal life with severe tinnitus. So the first thing, I think, the first step that needs to be taken from sort of the medical perspective, I'm not blaming the GPs, because they don't get the education. And from a personal perspective, I knew nothing about tinnitus before I started looking into it myself. So the first step is education. But in terms of sort of the new, in terms of where we can go for new sort of novel therapeutic techniques, I think data is going to be key. So with 𝐂𝐸𝐴𝐻, we already have the highest quality and highest quantity of data that exists on people with tinnitus on Earth. Because no one's sort of done this sort of thing before. And let me give an example of that. So we use something called the Tinnitus Functional Index, or the TFI, which is a validated questionnaire that assesses the impact of tinnitus on your life. And it will tell you how tinnitus is impacting a whole host of things, such as sleep, hearing, the actual loudness of the tinnitus itself, mental health, all that sort of thing. And in collecting this data, we can better understand how different treatments or different therapies will have an impact on different people. And we can start to make predictions about, well, this person is between the age of 20 and 30, their sleep is really badly affected by their tinnitus, and so on and so forth. And we can start to make predictions using machine learning and AI about the sort of things that will help them. And when it comes to sort of sound therapy as well, there's sort of a number of novel treatments that have been developed over the last sort of 18 months. There's 2 companies, one in Ireland, one in the US, that use electrical stimulation in combination with sound therapy to treat tinnitus. And that's something that's really exciting, and that's something that I think will have a lot more that will be looked into further, and there'll be a lot of research done to assess whether it is in fact effective. But the preliminary research is good. In terms of sort of the other hearing conditions, so again, I think data in combination with sound therapy is where we can really help. There's a company called 𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐼O who use something called threshold sound conditioning, which is essentially playing a very, very quiet sound at the frequency of your at the frequencies that you have hearing loss, in order to trigger a response from the brain. And it's kind of like brain training for your hearing. Wow. And they've actually seen some really good preliminary results for hearing loss and tinnitus as well.
Wow. So I'm even like thinking, for example, I wear my AirPods pretty much every day. So I'm always curious, like, well, how it can fit into the whole equation. especially when it comes to auditory conditions. But let's move on to speak about MedTech World. Are you looking forward to it? Is it your first conference after the COVID-19 pandemic kicked off?
Yeah, it actually is, and it's also my first time going to Malta as well.
Oh,
so
wow!
I'm very excited. Yeah,
Welcome to
so
Malta.
I'm really. Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm really excited, and looking forward to meeting some. I've seen really looking forward to meeting some really interesting people, and it'll be a really good conference. I'm looking forward to it.
Same here. I'm truly delighted to even have the possibility to meet people just like you. And with that in mind, usually what we love to do at the end of the podcast, to kind of close it off, let's say, we love to give people a time to speak at least 1 minute about something they would like to raise awareness about, or some trivia about themselves, something that will tickle your curiosity, so to say. So you've got 1 minute, Edmund, to get us on your side. Go for it.
Sure. Well, I'm gonna do both. So I'll start with a bit of trivia about myself. I am I like to DJ. I'm not a very good one at this thing I do at the time. But then going back to something I'd like to raise awareness of, I think obviously tinnitus is the obvious sort of the obvious thing to talk about here. Tinnitus is a condition that not really many people know about, but it affects 1 in 8 people, and 1 in 20 people have a significant impact on their quality of life. It has a big impact on your quality of life because it stops you from doing things like sleeping. It stops you from concentrating. If you just imagine a high-pitched ringing noise in your ear 24/7, not just for the rest of today, not just the rest of the week, but for the rest of your life, and you think how that would impact you, it really is a very, very unpleasant condition, and it's our mission to help these people with tinnitus. The really, really difficult thing with tinnitus is that if you have it, it's not something that people can see. And so a lot of these people suffer in silence, pardon the pun, and it's very difficult to access any help. So if you do know anyone with tinnitus, or if you have tinnitus yourself, please get in touch. I'd love to speak to you. I'd love to hear from you. And the important thing to remember is that there's always help available. Even if you've been told that there's nothing that can be done, that simply isn't true. There's lots that can be done. There's treatment that is been shown to be effective, and help is out there. So anyone that knows anyone with tinnitus or has tinnitus, or just is interested in reading a bit more about it, just head over to our website at joinauto.com. We'd love to hear from you.
So Edmund, we're delighted to have you here in Malta. As the Maltese would say, in this case would say, ciao, 𝐭𝐸 𝐷, and with that in mind, I would love to invite you for the next episode of the Digital Health Voice, which is done as part of collaboration between Digital Health Malta and MedTech World. Love to see you there. Cheers.